Hello and welcome from me, Warwick Lydiate. I'm speaking to you today from the Sangha House Health and Wellbeing Centre here in the centre of Taunton. A very warm welcome to this second presentation on the Enneagram. One of my favourite kind of go-to philosophers is Alan Watts. And Alan Watts said, every intelligent individual wants to know what makes them tick, and yet is at once frustrated and fascinated by the fact that oneself is the most difficult of all things to know. Well, in the light of that, thank goodness for the Enneagram, which is there for exactly that purpose of helping us to get to know ourselves, to get to know one another, to get to know what makes us tick, what drives us, and what motivates us. The Enneagram is this diagram here. It means figure of 9. And you'll see this circle with 9 points around it. And at each of the points is a cluster of energies that go to make up a personality type. So a little bit later in the program today, I shall be introducing Type 1, the aspects of Type 1, the energies and the habits and the patterns of thinking and behaviour that go into making up the Type 1. The Type 1 is the reformer. It has the name of the reformer. Type 2 is the helper, point 2. Point 3, the achiever. Point 4 is the romantic. 5 is the observer. 6 has the kind of double-barreled name, which I'll explain more when we get there, the loyal skeptic. Type 7 is the adventurer, type 8 the asserter, and type 9 the peacemaker. Those make up the basic kind of types of the Enneagram. You know, I like to think of the Enneagram as an artist's palette, a painter's palette of paints. And what I want to do over these early sessions is to give to you a kind of palette of bold colours of each of the types. But over time, we shall see that the colours get more nuanced. They get more pastel. There are different shades within the Enneagram. But it's important at first to get these 9 kind of primary colours, as it were, into our minds to help us understand who we are at this kind of basic level. But as we shall see, both the circle and the lines present us with ways out of these habits and patterns that go to make up personality type. I often in my talks speak about a couple of things that I think are important. Personality, we understand, develops generally between the ages of 2 and some say 12. Personally, I'd probably take that a little bit beyond. So using the Enneagram to type children is not a really good idea, because personality within children is very fluid. They can appear one type of personality one day and not just the next day, but literally within 10 minutes they can be something else. So personality really doesn't get firm and cemented till at least mid-teens or more likely late teens. And it's then that the Enneagram helps us to determine which type we are, the kind of things we need to work on to be the very best example of that type, and to even find ways out of that type, to explore ways in which we can move away from the habits and patterns that get fixed within us. The other thing I often say is that the Enneagram is always helpful to teach us about who we are And it's always helps to develop compassion for ourselves and for others, and self-understanding. But what I often say is that in times of, say, mental illness, the Enneagram will always be helpful, but it won't really affect a cure. So if it's yourself or somebody you know, I would always recommend somebody going to see getting professional help to sort out mental problems, mental health issues. Always the best thing. As I say, the Enneagram will help and give understanding and compassion, but it won't affect the cure. That's best handled by a professional psychologist, psychiatrist. So those are two little things that I often mention. One thing I would also say now about the 9 types is that each type kind of comes into the world on a quest, searching for something. So, for instance, the type 1 that we're going to look at in a few minutes, the reformer, the type 1 comes into the world looking for perfection. And that's a kind of drive within the type 1. And each of the types has that as a kind of background. Something feels as if it's missing. And it's important to find that. And they often give or portray, we all give and portray the very thing that we're missing in the hope of finding it. So the type 1 reformer looks for perfection. The type 2, the helper, looks for love, searching the quest for love. Type 3, the achiever, is on a quest for success. Type 4, the romantic, looks for meaning, depth, meaning of life. What does life mean? What does the universe mean? Type 5 searches for knowledge. Type 5 is the observer. Type 5 is on a quest for knowledge and wisdom and understanding. Type 6, the quest is for security and safety. For type 7, the adventurer, the quest is for joy. For type 8, the asserter is strength. And the quest for the 9 as a peacemaker is, of course, for peace. So we need to be kind of aware of what's missing, and it will often help us to identify our particular type. If we're aware of what's missing, what are we looking for? What is the big search of our life? So with those things dealt with, we'll come on to look at type 1, the reformer, seeking for perfection. We often say, don't we, don't forget to smell the roses. In life, when life's busy, when life's hectic, don't forget to smell the roses. Well, type 1s need to pause to smell the roses. But very often type 1s won't do that first. Walking through a garden, they'll see what's wrong. They'll see the weeds that need to be pulled up. They'll see the roses that need deadheading or a little bit of pruning. They'll see something that might need watering. There's tendency to see, first of all, what's wrong, what needs putting right, if you like, what needs reforming, what needs correcting. So there's this need to put stuff right. And at the basis of that, type 1s like rules and regulations, and they don't really like to see them broken. They're very discerning people, have a huge eye for detail, again, especially for things that are wrong. Very correct punctuation, spelling, those kinds of things. They matter. How you present things, how you do things is what's important. That would actually contrast when we come on to type 3. The 3 also, the achiever, wants to get things done, but will do things in a very expedient way, whereas the 1 has to do things in a very proper, very right way, a right way of doing things. Type 1s tend to be quite black and white people, not too many shades of grey, to borrow a book title. I've said not to think too much about children and the Enneagram, but in younger years, those that will develop into type 1s are often quite obedient children, very sensible. They tend to grow up quickly and be serious. 1s do have a good sense of humour, but probably you wouldn't look to a type 1 to generate humour. I don't think there are that many type 1s who are kind of stand-up comedians, although that might well be the case. That don't rule anything out, but it wouldn't be a usual kind of thing. They'll laugh at anything and have great senses of humour, but as I say, don't generate humour. Highly self-controlled people, controlling the self is very, very important, and being sure of what's right and wrong. Type 1s would make statements like, I know what should be happening here. I know what we should be doing. Or they might say to somebody, there is a right way to do this. Do let me show you. Do let me show you how this works. Or they might say, there is an appropriate way to behave, or even there's an appropriate way to dress. Or they might even ask themselves, what is the appropriate thing here? What is the appropriate dress code? That kind of thing would be important for a 1. Also, type 1s don't usually go overboard on praise. They wouldn't be kind of effervescent with praise and in awe of something. They'd be quite muted, full of admiration, but it would have come in quite a muted way. Now, I want to point out, as I did in an earlier session, that types 8, 9 and 1 form a kind of triad. The Enneagram is divided into 3 kind of big energy patterns. The 8, 9 and 1 is all about energy from the body. It's gut energy. And there's an instinctual energy to those 3 in particular. And that means that they would be quite decisive people and often experience anger. The downside, the shadow side of those 3 types, the 8, 9 and 1, is anger. And for the 1, that anger would show itself in a kind of irritation, an annoy little things that prove to be an annoyance. And that annoyance might also be with themselves. 1s can come across in kind of a critical way. But I have to tell you that what goes on inside many type 1s is a lot of self-criticism. Even to the point of kind of beating themselves up sometimes if they've done something wrong or something that they've been ashamed about. But anger is quite a motivator for the 1. It's the motivator to put things right and get things done. In these sessions, I'm going to quote quite regularly from what I think is an absolutely beautiful book. I might put a link to it at the end of this video. It's a book called Consolations by a poet called David Whyte. And this book explores single words. And this is what David Whyte says about anger. Anger is the deepest form of care for another, for the world, for the self, for life, for the body, for the family, and for all our ideals, all vulnerable and all possibly about to be hurt. Anger points to the purest form of compassion. The internal living flame of anger always illuminates what we belong to, what we wish to protect, and those things for which we are willing to hazard and even imperil ourselves. I think that's a beautiful quote. Very often, type 1s will want to dispel that anger and find ways of overcoming that. But there is this positive side, that it is a motivator and a driver to this protection and love for all kinds of people and situations. I explained as well in the earlier session that around the circle, you'll see that the type 1 has next to it the type 2, and the other side the type 9. And these in the Enneagram are called wings. And these play a part. So we're never purely a type. We might go, a type 1 might go slightly more towards the 9 and pick up the qualities of the peacemaker of the 9, or slightly more towards the 2, towards the helper. And that will impact and add some of the subtle shades to the primary colour of the type 1. So a 1 going towards the peacemaker might become a little bit more detached and feel a bit more chilled about life, and not quite so 9s kind of push anger down, and the 1 might pick up on that kind of energy and feel a little bit more detached and chilled. Moving towards the 2, the 1 might become more helpful, like the 2, more willing to help and more outgoing, but also a little bit more critical, can be bring out the kind of a critical side. So I want to just really end today by giving you a little tip to any who would recognize themselves in this particular type. If you've recognized any of those patterns in yourself today, I was about to say in a previous incarnation of myself, but in a previous career, shall we say, I was a professional musician. And I used to be very picky about the kind of music that I liked. I'm from the classical tradition, a classical musician. And I had very specific likes and dislikes about things, and would very quickly dismiss. I'm not a type 1 on the Enneagram, but I would have that kind of energy sometimes and be very quick, almost like a gut reaction. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I don't like that performer. I don't like this piece of music. And I learned from a really wise colleague that I used to work with in an orchestra, who used to say to me, just listen again, Warwick. Just listen again. Have another listen. Carefully listen to this music or to this performer, this performance that you're dismissing offhand. Just listen again. You'll find qualities that you may have missed if you take that time to listen again. And I would say that as a little kind of corrective to the type 1, the gut reaction. Oh, I don't like this, or this needs to be done. Pause. Breathe. Look again. Listen again. Thanks for listening, everybody. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye for now.